But I think these barriers, that coming on now to lack of flexible working, need to make all of us sort of think. So lack of flexible working, there's been a huge amount of work actually done on that. For example, the report that we did on sex discrimination in the finance sector in 2009 found women predominantly in secretarial and admin positions, because that's where most of the part-time working happened. Research by Cranfield University in 2008 showed that nearly 50% of female managing directors of London's top investment banks were childless. And those that did have children, their partner assumed the role of primary carer. And that obviously tends to sort of reinforce the fact that you can't get on in organisations if you've got to if you're working part-time. And often part-time work can lead to lower quality work, which doesn't fully utilise women's skills, because organisations may not actually understand how to sort of adopt a more flexible working approach. Their managers may find it difficult to sort of manage if someone's working part-time, working from home, or flexible working. We still have this, what do they call it, sort of the jacket on the chair, if you like, that if you need to be there in the office for people to think you're actually contributing something. But the Women in Work Commission estimated that if women were actually at senior levels contributing as much as they could be, then the estimate of the value to the UK economy would be between 15 and 23 billion pounds per annum. A quite staggering thing, that if women got on in senior positions or organisations but were able to sort of work flexibly. So therefore there's a very significant underuse of women in work, I think. Now there's quite a lot being done on that at the moment. We've been doing a series of reports in the Commission called Working Better, which are providing input to the Department for Business Innovation and Skills Modern Workplaces consultation. So the government is actually starting to take this quite seriously. And if you want to have a look at some of the stuff we've been doing, all of these reports from the Commission are actually available on the website. So I think that one of the sort of barriers that you can see at the bottom here from the employer perspective on this slide is operational pressures. Now sometimes that can just be convenient sort of talking, but also maintaining customer service requirements. I thought the next one, the line manager's ability to manage flexible working, said more about the organisation managers than it does actually about women. But also senior management culture and attitude. So there's a mix here of people not really thinking through what they can actually do. Also sometimes I think the labelling that we do, flexible working and so on, makes it sound like something really grand rather than something adopting, someone coming in late some days because they're taking the children to school or something else, or they have other caring responsibilities, and staying later another day. So we need to be careful not to create a huge industry out of this, of labelling, which makes it seem all the more complicated, particularly for small to medium-sized enterprises. So coming on then to, and there aren't any fabulous answers at the end of this, I have to tell you. I'm hoping you're going to have all the answers. But coming on to an example of science, engineering and technology, my background sort of in information technology. And you can see here that 12.3%, there are 5.5 million people working in the range of professions of science, engineering and technology, but only 12.3% of them are women. But the staggering one really in terms of loss of expertise and skills for me is the second one, that 70% of women graduates who graduate in those professions don't then work in those occupations. So it's a huge loss of skills to the industry. And again, the report which has come out of the UK Research Centre with Women in Science, Engineering and Technology estimates the loss of these skills to the economy is £2 billion per annum. Now in 2011, how many of you have heard of the UK Research Centre and Women in Science, Engineering and Technology, WISE and UKRC? They've now sort of merged and are really forming quite a sort of powerful force. They've got about 30 years of experience in trying to promote SET careers for girls and women and supporting change in education and employment to attract women into SET. But I think that one of the issues that we've got to deal with here, which is a brand issue, which is about people seeing science, engineering and technology as geeky and not understanding, for example, that there's very little that we do in our society, in our economy, that isn't, for example, underpinned by information technology. There's very little that happens that doesn't have some dimension of sort of engineering or science. And I think that if we're going to get into a position where we don't have the third statistic on this slide, which is only 9% of board directorships in SET companies are women, and 35% of SET companies no women on their boards, then we really are sort of, up against it, I think, in the information economy. And this is one of the things that worries me, if you like, is in a global information economy, This is a huge loss of talent, which we really can't afford to have happening. So those are some of the sort of key barriers I see. Now what I'd like to do is just sort of finish on what are some of the current initiatives before we throw open for discussion. So there are 4 sort of initiatives I'd like to touch on, but first an insight into some of the research about the business case for more women sort of in senior positions, which led to the Lord Davis's review. Now the CBI report Women at the Top that I mentioned earlier highlighted key business reasons for increasing board diversity and encouraged firms in their reports, their annual reports and accounts, to adopt a comply or explain approach, and that's being picked up now by the Financial Reporting Council. They said in that report, in the current economic climate and in the face of growing international competition, it's never been more important for UK firms to get it right. We need to drive effective, innovative, well-governed performance by drawing on the widest range of talent. But there is a sticking point. Women make up half the population and more than half of the UK university graduates, yet continue to remain underrepresented in boardrooms and senior levels of business. It's clear that the growth in the number of female graduates alone is insufficient to bring about change at the more senior level, and business needs to do more, which is good encouragement from the trade body. And then Lord Miners, in his evidence to the UK House of Commons Treasury, regards one of the biggest risks of the board that's not representative as being the mutual reinforcement of prejudice and desire to achieve early consensus in a comfortable way. And lack of diversity in boards tends to actually achieve that sort of same size fits all. And some of you may remember Harriet Harman after the banking crisis in 2008, when she appeared before the Treasury Select Committee, said that at that time she was the Equality Minister, and she said, as she commented, that Lehman Sisters might not have gone broke. I think also there are financial risks, particularly with the introduction of the Equality Act and other legislation that damages the reputation of companies if they end up in court by having demonstrated that they're not actually dealing with discrimination, let alone encouraging talent. I think also as we go forward with the increasing outsourcing of public services to the private sector and to some extent the voluntary sector, the public sector will still retain the responsibility for the public sector equality duty, and therefore being able to compete for public sector services and being able to demonstrate that companies are taking equality seriously will also be a key factor in tendering processes. And finally, economic benefits through changing demographics, not just age, both global and age-related, means getting the best talent means being an employer of choice. And that means providing the environment where everyone can flourish in the organisation. So the first review of this was Lord Davis, which was in February 2011, Lord Davis of Abersoch. And his report called for at least 25% of FTSE 100 boards to be women by 2015, which will be up from 12.5% in 2010. And he recommended that the Financial Reporting Council, which governs sort of quoted companies and corporate life, should amend the UK Corporate Governance Code to require listed companies to establish a policy encouraging boardroom diversity, set measurable objectives for themselves, and also disclose in their annual report and accounts how they're getting on. We'll come on to that in a minute. But Lord Davis, in his report, summarised 4 key areas of benefit of greater representation of boards. And he came up with some very interesting statistics about improved return on investment and shareholder performance. 42% higher return on sales, 66% higher return on investment capital, and 53% higher return on equity through having more diversity in boards. Accessing the widest talent pool, with 6 out of 10 UK graduates now being women. Also increased responsiveness to the marketplace, particularly if you're in a consumer-facing industry, because women are still estimated to make 70% of the household-related decisions and hold nearly 50% of UK spending wealth. And finally, the point about governance, in terms of not appearing in court and therefore demonstrating that you're not actually able to manage yourselves effectively.